Hello, Linuxfest Northwest 2020. Sorry that the COVID virus has kept me from my annual sojourn up to Bellingham, Washington. But second best thing we can do is a presentation. Now, I was originally supposed to do 3 presentations, one on speaking at open source conferences, which I hope to not curse this year. Second one was on query tuning, which I probably will not get to record by the time the weekend comes up because that's quite an in-depth thing. And thirdly, this one about MySQL new features. If you haven't met me before, my name's Dave Stokes. I'm a community manager at for MySQL at Oracle. I've been on the community team for several years and been to Bellingham several times. By the way, if you ever have any questions, you can find me on Twitter at Stoker. I'm david.stokes@oracle.com, and I'm fairly easy to track down if you do a search for Dave Stokes MySQL. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about new features in MySQL 8. MySQL 8 has been out now for 2 years, and one of the problems that I have is that we put a lot of great features into it, but unless you're keeping on track of what we're doing all the time, you just don't know what's going on. So that's what we're going to talk about. So let me get us going. Whoops, let me go back there. Safe harbor statement. This is Oracle legalese saying that if I'm talking about a new feature which has not come out yet, please take it with a grain of salt. I do not have perfect knowledge of the future. So until it comes out and it's readily available and or has a stock keeping unit number and price attached to it, take what I say with a little bit of skepticism. By the way, MySQL 5.6 end of life is February 5th, 2021. So if you're running 5.6 or before, please upgrade. 5.7 has been out for several years now. As I mentioned earlier, 8.0 has been out for 2 years. Me? Well, I started using MySQL when it first became available. I've used it in many projects. I had a period in my life where I was rescuing projects where they'd already spent the money, so I ended up having to use open source software and used it because of low dollar and now high quality. Joined the MySQL AB company as a PHP programmer on the certification team. I've been through the Oracle acquisition, which was after the Sun acquisition of MySQL AB. Left for a little bit to work for a company called Calpont, which had a columnar storage engine called InfiniDB. Been on the MySQL community team for 8 years. I have the DBA 8.0 certification. Currently, we're putting together the developer certification. And I live in Texas, and I do have the required Hound Dog and the pickup truck. Program agenda. As you can see here, I got a very detailed agenda. Oops, that's not the agenda I want. What I really wanted to do in person was have people ask questions. I feel things go much better interactively. Unfortunately, can't do that today. And also want to get some feedback from you as what you want to see in the future versions of MySQL. Well, we've gone on to a 4 times a year or so release cycle. In the old days, it took us 2 or 3 years to get major features into MySQL. Slow, costly, not great for our consumers. So we've gone on the CI/CD bandwagon. By the way, the software is much more complex than it was in the 5.5 era, and you can actually go out into GitHub and take a look at it if you want. Build your own copy and actually make changes and upload it back to us. Something else we did was we switched to a plugin feature that allows very fast development, and if you don't like that plugin, you can just unload it. It's usually just a shared object. This gives us a better way to give you an improved product much faster. It's also better coordination between the various components, the MySQL Shell, ODB Cluster, router, and all the other things. By the way, you'll notice the release numbers all come out the same. So MySQL 8.0.20, when it comes out next week, will all be accompanied by MySQL Shell 8.0.20, MySQL Router 8.0.20, etc., etc. We give you not only a much better product, but I think we can actually say that we have much better quality. One of the things that Oracle did was they gave us a lot more rigor when they took us over. They looked at the product and pointed out several glaring problems that we knew we had and then told us to make sure they were fixed. And since then, we've been a lot better at engineering software. So, as I mentioned earlier, the current release for this week, 8.0.19. So if you're going down and get the latest and greatest shell, workbench, router, connectors, server, it's all 8.0.19. Now 8.0.20 is supposed to come out next week. We had a holdup because of one of the security products that we bundle in with us for secure communications having a problem, but hopefully that will be coming out next week. So let's look at the MySQL community server. And yes, it's still free under the GPL version 2. Now last January this came out and we added a lot of features. One of the big ones was the ability to lock accounts after too many login attempts. We added the table and row statements to better comply with the SQL standard. We added some limits on recursive expressions and alias on duplicate key. Let's take a look at the first one of those. Here we can create a user and we say, okay, after 3 bad login attempts, lock that account for 3 days. That's lock time in days. By the way, if you have a need for a shorter lock time, hours, minutes, whatever, please make a case to me and send it to me at david.stokes@oracle.com and I'll pass it on to the engineers. Also, you can alter a user to lock an account. The second example there, failed login attempts 4. And at that time, the password lock time becomes unbounded. It means the account is unlocked until someone with DBA privileges can come in there and reset it. Tables and rows. The first statement there, table T, order by C, limit 10, offset 3. If you're used to doing select star, that's the same thing as table T. And also the second set of examples there, if you're used to doing the insert into T1 values and then in parentheses 1, 2, 3, parentheses 4, 5, 6, another set of parentheses 7, 8, 9, you can now put in the keyword row instead. Why does this matter? Well, we're trying to get closer to the standard and there's a lot of canned packages that work this way. Now, duplicate key statements. This is not something new, it's just a better way of addressing it. The new way is we have a keyword of new, where here we're trying to update a record and somehow that record's already there, but we don't want to lose that data, so we want to increment the value of the key and put that record. In the past, you had to use the values function, and now you just use the keyword new. Back in October, random passwords, explain, analyze, hash joins, better compression, and the Enterprise Edition supporting HashiCorp Vault for your at-rest encryption. So, random password, here's an example. The link there is to my blog. Create a user, foo identified by random password. As you see there, this is a generated password. By the way, you can control the complexity of the password from very simple passwords to multiple special characters, multiple uppercase, multiple numbers, and the length. So if you need something that generates that for you and does it all in one place, MySQL can do that for you. Also, we added hash joins. If you're doing equijoins of some sort, you'll notice a lot better performance. As you can see from this example, the first and the last examples, you see the little blue lines, and they show market improvement. And the other ones, you can barely see the little blue lines because the performance is that much better. By the way, next week when 8.0.20 comes out, you'll have anti-summer and outer hash joins. For those of you who are doing big equijoins, like in data warehousing or analytics, will really, really appreciate this. Something else we added was explain, analyze. For those of you who aren't familiar with trying to optimize queries, you use the explain keyword prepended to your query to go out there, and it makes an estimate of what it's going to need to do the query plan. The query plan is the most economical way of going out and getting your data based on historical information. Well, it's kind of like a GPS. You know, your GPS getting you to the grocery store is great, but it may not know about the road that washed out right out of your housing development. May not know that there's a train across the tracks. There might not know other stuff. So historical data, this is the fastest way to go. Current data is not right there. So what explain analyze does is actually runs the query and tells you the actual times and the actual performance. Very, very handy. Back in July, we added a whole bunch of other features: multivalued indexes, JSON document validation, dual password, the clone plugin. And let's take a look at multivalued indexes. As you know, MySQL can store JSON arrays and the JSON data type. And the only trouble is previously you could only have one entry in an index table for each row. Well, when you have something like car parts, you know, where you have an assembly for the doors, the windows, the muffler, the catalytic converter, the seats, One item can have multiple entries. It might be multiple credit card numbers, multiple phone numbers, et cetera, et cetera. Well, now you can have multiple entries from one row into an index, and very, very handy. And I can tell you from personal experience, until you get up around 20 million records, this really doesn't pay off for fairly simple data. JSON document validation. We've been able to store JSON data for going on 5 years now. Now, the only complaint I really had is that if you're used to a relational table, if you're trying to put a string into a zip code or other numeric field, the server complains that you can't do that. JSON, it didn't care. It just took it in there as long as it was valid JSON. Now, as an example, you'll see 3 items in red. We're creating a table. We're going to call it testx, and we're going to have a constraint in there called myAge_inRange. And what we do is we have an object, and its name is myAge. It's numeric in type. Minimum age is 28, maximum age is 99, and by the way, this is required. So if you try to input a record and it doesn't have a key of myAge in there, it's going to reject it. If the values for that key are under 28 or over 99, it's going to reject it. And here's 2 examples. The first one, inserted in testx values myAge 27. Constraint myAge_inRange is violated. So you know that there's something about this record we're trying to put in there where the age is not right. Second one, you see we have someone who's only 97, and away it goes. It's very happy with it. Dual passwords. This one, when I first looked at it, and I thought, this is kind of odd. Why would I want 2 passwords on an account? And then it hit me. How many times have you had someone in your corporate security come up and say, hey, we want to change the password on all 800 applications we're running right now. Can you do that real quick? Well, you're just not going to fire up VI or Vim, star.php or star.js and try to do them all in one swipe. What you can do is create a new password, like you see here, alter user, identified by the password, and retain current password. Now, the identified by on there is the secondary password. So now you can go through and you can change all the applications that you need to in a hopefully orthogonal or ordered way of doing it and not have to do it in panic. Now, if you actually look in the MySQL.user table, there's now a column called user attributes, and you see that it's actually hashed that password in there. So you've done your updates to all your applications, and you want to get rid of that secondary password. All I have to do is do an alter user, discard old password, and away you go. Okay, back a year ago, one of the problems we used to have was people was MySQL upgrade, not forgetting to run that. Also constraint checks, as you saw an example earlier. The C API supports asynchronous non-blocking communications to the server, and also we added another format to the explain command. Okay, constraint checks. Here's a simple table. The first check we have is that C1 is not equal to C2. Second one is C1 is greater than 10. C2 has a constraint on it that C2 is greater than 0. C3 has a check on it that it's less than 100. And we have a constraint called C1 non-zero, where C1 is not equal to 0. And we also checked that C1 is greater than C3. Now, these are all valid checks, but I kind of recommend the third one where you have a name on there. If the first 2 constraints get caught by the server, they're just going to say, hey, the first constraint, second constraint didn't come back. Third one, if something goes wrong where C2 is -1, it's going to come back and say, hey, constraint C2 positive failed. A lot easier to track down, especially late at night after a long day at work and trying to figure out what the heck's going wrong. A little bit nice to give yourself a clue what you're checking for. Okay, a year ago, February, we added a admin port. This way you can shut off all the other connections and still be able to get in your server to do administrative work. We also added JSON array aggregate and object aggregate to window functions. So if you're doing data analytics, you can do that. By the way, those functions work with JSON and non-JSON data. Added set persist and set persist only. And lateral drive tables. Lateral drive tables are kind of interesting because if you've ever written a subquery, you end up having all these nasty little references that you can't do. Now, if you notice in the middle of the screen, I have lateral and then in parentheses, select code to CC from country, where country code equals code, and we're going to call all that X. Now, previously, before we had lateral derived tables, we could not reference that data from the outside query. The outside query just got dumped a whole bunch of stuff, and we couldn't directly access what we wanted. But now, with the lateral derived tables, it makes it a little bit easier. I still prefer common table expressions over subqueries, but this is a fairly handy trick. Okay, since 8.0 became generally acceptable, we've added a lot of information. Data dictionaries, all your metadata is now stored in the database. In the past, if you've gone under var, lib, MySQL, you've probably seen all the .frms, MYIs, all the other little stuff out there. That was the metadata, and now that we're actually storing it in the database itself, it's freeing up inodes, which is beneficial. The other thing is it now gives you a limitation of having millions of tables within a schema. So I think the record I've heard is someone getting to about 33 and getting bored. Histograms, which are a better way, in some cases, than indexes, as a way to notify your optimizer where your data is. Resource groups, CATs. This isn't the play or the horrible movie. That's actually a contention-aware transaction scheduler, where if you have hot rows or hot columns, when they start getting contentious, it knows how to better handle those. It takes care of those. Improved our JSON support, especially with JSON table, to turn structured data or unstructured data temporarily into structured tables for SQL processing. A whole bunch of other new stuff that we've gone into. So, what are we giving you? Better SQL with windowing functions, common table expressions, derived tables, check constraints. Our NoSQL game is getting a lot better. JSON validation, improvements in the XDev API, JSON table, and multi-value indexes. Now, unfortunately, this is getting a little bit old, but I need to get it updated. MySQL 8 has been the fastest uptake of any other version of MySQL for a lot of reasons, the performance, the features, and it's just a much, much better product. Also, I like to talk about ODB Cluster, which is the way we'd like to have you structure your data. Up in the upper left in the baby blue is your application, and on the application machine is a connector that talks to MySQL Router, which is also going to be on the machine. Router will do some load balancing between a cluster of machines. Here our cluster is 3 machines, one doing read-writes and the other one's doing read-onlys. And this is all administered by our new shell. Also, this past winter, we introduced Replica Set, which is a traditional MySQL replication, but we do a lot of the setup for you. And one of the better parts of this is the clone plugin, which I'll talk about in a second. You still have to do the manual failover yourself, but we set up a lot of the work, makes it a little bit easier to do replication. Now, the clone plugin basically takes the NODB table spaces from one machine and very quickly clones it onto another machine, exceedingly fast. So if you have to bring a new machine online and you don't want to play backup and move data around and then restore games, please look at clone. Very, very handy. MySQL Shell is our new shell. It's an advanced client and code editor. Has great command completion, extensive health support. So if you don't remember all the arguments to a function, you can get them out there. It speaks in 3 modes: structured query language you'd expect, Python and JavaScript. So if you have libraries in either of those languages that you really like, you can use those to work with your data. It's also our admin tool for NODB Cluster and Replica Set. And by the way, if you're running 5.7, there's a util.check for server upgrade. They'll actually go out there and make sure that before you move to 8.0, what possible problems you can have, like you're using reserved verbs that shouldn't be there, any UTF-8, MB4 problems you might have. And big help is the bulk loader. There's a parallel bulk loader that will take comma, tab, or JSON flat files and upload them into your server extremely quickly. This is what the new shell looks like. It's no longer monochromatic. The first command you see up there on the top, /c root a localhost to /worldx, that's me authenticating in. By the way, it saves passwords in an encrypted fashion. And if you type /s, it'll give you the status. If you look down 2/3 of the way down the page, you notice that it's talking on our new X protocol. And just above that, you'll see that we're running TLS AES 256 GCM SHA 384. We, by default, want to encrypt your data. Your bosses are talking cloud, but they're buying security like crazy. This way, the stuff between your client and your MySQL server is encoded or encrypted, and down below you notice that all the character sets are UTF-8 and B4. By the way, it's very easy with the new shell to use the document store that we have, which is our NoSQL JSON data store. As you can see here, I type /use to talk to a schema. Once I do that, I have a pointer called DB, and from there I can create a document collection. Here you see I create a collection called A. I add a record. As you can see, that's just JSON. There's no SQL. I haven't had to do a create table, hadn't set up relations, haven't had to set up indexes, haven't had to normalize data. I go ahead and just add a record, and boom, it's there. As I mentioned earlier, bulk uploader. That's get hard to say. It originally started with a Python script by one of our former community managers. And our engineers looked at it and said, well, let's just write our own little utility. And I thought that was rather great. And then they added the parallel bulk loader. This is running it from the command line. As you can see here, it only went to 3 threads. I think it will go up to 5 threads. Extremely fast. And in 2020, we're hoping to have 8.0.19, 2021, maybe 22. And I wanted to hopefully being Bellingham, asking you folks what you wanted to see in MySQL. Unfortunately, I can't, so if you do have any feedback for me, please let me know. This is some guesses of stuff that I think we're going to see. The Enterprise Edition has been doing a lot of work on security. We have a lot of folks who have moved over from the community to the Enterprise Edition to get a hold of these things like data masking, the whitelist of query data firewall, encryption at rest, and a whole bunch of other neat features. Also, we're doing a lot more in JSON support and graphical information systems. I think you're going to see a lot more features added in new shell. We're still chasing a few mutexes for better performance. I think we're all going to be suffering with Kubernetes-ish-like deployment infrastructure, so we're working on that. I have a gut feeling that DBAs are going to be harder to find, but the scope of the job will widen. I also think that one of our big problems is going to be bad data architecture, and what we're going to see is that people who thought they had a data warehouse or a data lake end up having digital data landfill. And number 10 there, I was going to ask what you folks thought you were going to see. By the way, if you're using MySQL and JSON, I recommend my book. It's frequently on sale at Amazon, which means instead of getting 3 cents, I get a cent and a half. Still a good reference guide. And with that, I want to thank you all. If you have any questions, please ping me at Stoker on Twitter, david.stokes@oracle.com, and you should be able to reach me somehow through the website. And with that, I would like to thank you for watching.